Hello, I'm Big Pezza and this is my review of the BMW G650GS Sertao, or Sertao. I've split this review up into sections to try and keep this long-term review, give it some structure and organisation. So a little bit of background before we begin. I've been riding bikes for over 15 years. I'm 5'5", so an average height, is it? A little bit on the short side, not the longest of legs, and yes, that's a big reason why I chose this bike. But anyway, I've battered this bike through 25 countries and done a lot of miles, and I've used this bike for everything. And also I have done, for the past 7 years, all the servicing myself, and as the date of recording this bike is just under 60,000 miles on the clock. I know there's someone out there who has probably done more with this bike, but I would like to think that I'm in the top percentage of people who really push their BMW 650 to the limit. So now you know what my background is, I guess, shall we get into the review? Accessibility. Like I said, I'm a bit short, especially for big adventure bikes. And this is just about right in my height range. It has quite a low seat with a 17-inch rear and a 21 front. I mean, most modern ADV bikes have that 18-inch rear and they're just a little bit too tall. The best part as well, that this bike, you do have a low seat, it is mid-range, but you still have very good ground clearance. With other bikes out there with the same seat height, you don't get anywhere near the same ground clearance. For instance, like the Himalayan, similar height, unfortunately it doesn't have any ground clearance at all, so it would struggle if the trail starts to get a bit gnarly. And when it comes to accessibility, would this be your first bike? Would it be a really good first big bike? Unfortunately, the BMW is just over that A2 license requirement, so it's actually just over 47 brake horsepower, between 48 and 49. So you'd actually have to pay money to restrict it down to 47 brake horsepower, which is a bit silly. The weight? Okay, so this is the big issue, isn't it? If you're small like me, you're moving around a big bike. This bike is 192 kilograms. Well, on paper it is, but you don't really feel it. And it balances out so much better than my Honda CRF 250 used to do. The BMW has that low seat with a petrol tank underneath it, keeping everything nice and low in the middle. And with big wide bars, I don't know, it just feels so easy to handle. And then when you drop it, there's plenty of places to grab it and pick it back up again. So even though it comes in at almost 200 kilograms, it doesn't feel like it. It's easy to ride. The bike has enough power to hold 70 miles an hour comfortably. You have enough torque to move if you really want to. There's no power band, just a steady constant throughout gears, and not enough power to scare yourself silly. Top speed on this bike is, you can get to 90 out of it, but I don't recommend it. It's far too uncomfortable for the rider and far too uncomfortable for the bike. Accessibility wise, how easy it's to work on, to access parts, to change things. It's not the best, not the worst, but you can do all the servicing stuff yourself. There's no service lights, you don't need to plug in a computer, which is great. And I've been doing all the maintenance myself over the past 7 years, but as the bike's going to be 10 soon, I think I might just give it to BMW to check the engine, so that make sure it lasts another 10 years. Features. What actually comes with this bike as standard? Well, you actually get a decent bash plate, heated grips as standard, you get ABS, on or ABS off, but it is that old style ABS, so not great, but we'll touch on that later. You get a nice glass headlight, good visibility, a very basic dash, 2 trips, a clock and a rev gauge, and a speedo. No fuel gauge, only a fuel light. Why? Doesn't really matter, with 2 trips it's okay. And it has a 14-litre petrol tank, which I find I can get 180 to 200 miles range, which is roughly about 150 miles. Reserve comes on, and then I know that I've got maybe another 50 miles, maybe 60 or 70 tops, but I've never gone more than 190 or 200 miles to find out. So now that I've talked about what you get with the bike stock, let's talk about upgrades. So all the add-ons that my bike has, in no particular order, we'll start at the front. Headlight guard. saved my glass headlight a few times from the odd flying stone. Radiator guard and fork guards, must have. Bark buster hand guards, my goodness, these things are solid. I'm only on my second set. Crash bars with soft toy add-ons, it's optional. Bash plate is stock and it has done the job rather well. I haven't felt the need of changing it. Main stand, yeah, the bike does not come with a main stand. Leo Vince exhaust, a little bit louder than the stock one, even with all the baffles in, but it was more to do with the weight saving and the space saving. And with that space, I have got these two lovely tool tubes, rear racks, which I've adapted to fit some nice Pelly cases. Hey, it's a cheap solution, and when the bike falls over, Pelly cases are made of very strong plastic and they seem to absorb, don't seem to be sending any shocks into the rack or into the bike itself. In my experience, when a metal pannier meets the ground, then the metal pannier will dent, but on the rack side, not always on the outside. I have a rear rack, you know, a givey thing, but this is the style you want, with a nice cutout so that you can actually get access to the little seat release without having to take apart or take off the rear rack every time you need to take the seat off. Hey, look at this, I thought I'd include it anyway. A USB charger, very cheap, and it still works after 7 years, not bad going. I've got a RAM mount here for my phone can go, seems to hold it in place even off-road. Now when it comes to the suspension, I've actually upgraded it. Yeah, the stock is a bit soft, so I've got Hyper Pro progressive springs in the front forks, and for the rear suspension I've got an older BMW 650 Dakar, which just about fits, and it's a lot firmer than the stock Sertao one. Oh, and for tyres, yeah, I know, Heidenau K60s are not the best in mud, but they're great in majority of everything else that I do, so it's okay. They're just not really good when it comes to soft mud or sand. Oh, and if you are thinking about getting one of these bikes, or you do, you would notice that these bikes lean over quite far, because a lot of the G650GS series, they seem to have a 19 front and a 17 rear, or a 19 front and an 18 rear, but the Sertao has a 1721, but they didn't, and it's higher as well. The forks are longer. You get that extra, I can't remember how many millimeters travel it is, you get an extra few millimeters of travel. But they didn't change the side stand, so the side stand is exactly the same on all these bikes. So the BMW G650 Sertao leans over at an incredible angle. That's why bolting a hockey puck is a must-have upgrade, and so many Sertao riders have already done it. It gives you that little bit of lift. You also get a nice big foot for when you do want to stop the bike in soft mud and it doesn't want to fall over, which is great. Oh, it's a service item as well. I seem to lose one every 2 to 3 years, but as they're only really cheap, it doesn't really bother me so much. Well, what's it actually like to ride? Well, it's a 652cc single cylinder, steady, power, all the way to about 70 miles an hour, and then it will really scream after that to get to about 90. It is a single cylinder, it is vibey. It is not the best comfortable ride ever. I can usually go for an hour and a half before I need to stop and have a stretch, but it's not crippling, it's just uncomfortable. It's a big dual sport. It's not great at anything, but it can do everything. I mean, it feels a bit odd to take corners fast with a 21 front and a 17 rear. I don't like pushing it so hard. And for some strange reason, whenever I ride this bike, even though I've been owning it for so many years, I keep trying to put it into 6th gear. Yeah, I keep forgetting that this bike only has 5. However, the 5 standard gears work really well and they're perfect for off-road. First gear is nice and short, what you want for downhill descents. But yeah, there's only 5 gears and it feels like it could have a nice 6 overrun, but it doesn't have it. However, the gearbox is full of false neutrals. After knocking it from second into what I think is first, and then I go to give it some power to realise that no, I've actually just tapped it into neutral. If you're not aggressive with the gear lever, you can also find a nice dead spot sometimes between 3 and 4 and 4 and 5. No quick half taps, it needs full movement, you have to bash it into gear. Okay, now the stock foot pegs are narrow and uncomfortable with normal bike boots. but when you're using off-road boots, that stiff sole, you don't notice them, and with them thin foot pegs, they help you pivot so much better. The screen and weather protection is okay for me because I'm short and I'm okay, but if anyone who's a bit longer in body, they'd probably be buffeted by the screen, and you may want to change it out for a much larger one. And the last thing, stopping this bike. Trying to stop the bike. Okay, the brakes are not the best. It's a big bike with a single disc front, and combine that with an overly aggressive ABS system makes stopping this bike a bit longer than you would hope for. To be honest, it might be worth riding this bike without ABS. I think most riders, doesn't matter your skill level, you could probably outbrake the ABS system on this bike. Reliability and breakdowns / common issues. Anyway, I've had a few upsets with this bike over the years, but most of them was due to me mistreating the bike. So I guess in no particular order, cush drive rubbers. These bikes, it's very common that these bikes seem to just chew through cush drives every few years or every 10,000 or 15,000 miles in my experience. The IGN off error code. Look, I'll put a link below to this video that explains it in full, but in short, it is a loose connection or a bit of corrosion that can build up over the years, and it's easy fix if you know where to look, and a bit of WD-40 and it's okay. Pitted forks, not something I've had to deal with due to my bike using fork guards its life. But if you're getting one of these second hand and you pick up one without fork guards, it could have some nasty pitting on the stanchions. The switches are not great on this bike. BMW switches, the hazard lights and the heated grips. Well, the hazard lights for starters, they're in a silly position, you can't get to them and switch them on quick. And these switches are naff, and they're very expensive to replace if they break. That's why on my heated grip, as you can see here, I have a 3-way toggle switch which cost me $2.99 on eBay, and it works fine. It's actually easy to use, and a lot of people report the Sertao switches breaking, whereas the F650 Dakar and them ones, they're still fine. So that's what I found personally to be the common problems with the Sertao. What's gone wrong with mine over the years? Well, anything maintenance related won't really count. For example, I had a fuel leak and I found out that it was the fuel filter / pressure regulator was 3,000 miles overdue for a change. Yes, the bike had a fuel leak, but it was a service item I was meant to change and just forgot about it. I changed it, no problem since. Anyway, so no particular order. Chain adjusters seized. I had to replace them. Not too hard to replace, but just a bit annoying. So now I actually just pull them out every year or so, re-grease them and put them back in again. If you saw recently, my suspension, the bottom bolt came undone or snapped, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I ended up with a BMW lowrider, but it was £6 for a replacement bolt. Fixed it, put it back together, no problem. I once did overcook the brakes and I boiled the rear, but all I did was new pads, bled the system and it was fine and the disc wasn't warped. The only time I've had to be recovered with the BMW is when I got a flat tyre and then I pinched the tube when I replaced it. I have slight damage to the rear tail cover of my BMW and something gets in there, maybe water or dirt, and every now and then my brake lights stop working, and all I have to do is take out the bulb, clean the connections, put it back in and it's fine. I probably should get a new tail light cover and gasket, but I'm far too tight to do that. And I had that IGN off error as well. Massive pain if it does happen to you. It could be a broken wire, but I'll put the full video will be in the description of this video. IGN off, what happened exactly. It took me a while to find out exactly what that was, but it is a simple, easy fix as long as you know what to look for. Service time, so 6,000 miles or 1 year, whatever comes first, etc. Anyway, some things come every 2 years, some things are miles. I've been doing all the work myself. It's not that bad to work on. There's a few awkward placed bolts, but generally speaking, the services are not that bad. Oil change, a little bit of a pain. There's 3 places oil comes from. You've got the oil filter, the lung on the side, and the sump. Refilling can also be a pain. It can be very hard to put the right amount in. I've heard many cases where BMW dealerships themselves, the technicians themselves, put too much oil into the bike, causing the bike to be sluggish. The oil filter is really well protected and out of the way, which is good, but you do actually have to undo the reservoir for the suspension to get to it. The really bad bits come to when you want to put a new spark plug in. Oh, by the way, this bike takes 2 because it has assisted spark start for a 650 single, so it's good. But you do have to take out the battery, and you have to take a lot of the top to get to it, and it's not a quick job. Now the best thing, of course, you do not need a computer to service the bike or tell the bike that you have done a service. The only exception to that, or the bit that's a bit of a pain, is bleeding the brakes with a bike with ABS. This is where you're meant to have it plugged into a computer and tell the bike it's a service, we're going to bleed the brakes now, and it will put the ABS pump to open. But from what I found out online and everything, and I've done it over years and I've never had really a problem, but what I found from other people and what they've said and done is that you bleed the system, then you take the bike for a ride, make sure you get the ABS to engage, then that pushes the old fluid out into the system and sucks a new one in, and then again you have to sit there and bleed the whole system again. Yeah, it takes a long time to bleed these brakes. Just the fact that the lines are long, go from the handlebar down to the ABS pump, then back towards the front caliper. Oh, also pro tip, if you are doing the service and you're doing the rear, what happens commonly is that you can get a bit of airlock in there. If you have any problems like that, you want to try reverse bleed the brakes. Use a hypodermic. This will save you hours of trying to push that air out of the line. Other than that, the bike has been fine to work on, and the service cost for items is not bad. Air filters around 10 quid, oil filters are about the same. Running costs. The bike is built better than some other bikes around the same price, so most of the parts that have been replaced has just been service items. The bike can possibly do 70 miles to the gallon, but I find my average to be around 58. That's with luggage and off-road, and then maybe 62 miles to the gallon on a ride. I did actually once manage to get 70 miles to the gallon, but that was doing 60 miles an hour on a motorway with no luggage on the bike. Annoyingly, the bike is over 600 cc's, so it puts it in the higher tax bracket for the UK, or the vehicle tax, not road tax, the vehicle tax. Puts it up by quite a bit, unfortunately. Over £100 a year, kind of upsetting, but what can you do? But on the plus side, insurance is super cheap on this bike. I think it's because it's a BMW, and I actually paid less for the year than when I had the CRF. I would say I had to pay out around £200 a year on service items and repairs here and there, but if you know this bike and you know me and you've seen the videos on this channel, you're probably thinking, how is this bike actually still alive? So, should you get a Sertao? There is a Dakar out there, don't forget, the Dakar 650. Hey, it's a bit old now, but I wouldn't want to pick one up. Fighting carbs is never fun on big bikes, especially getting to them on these models. The Sertao is lovely, it's fuel injection, the bike can sit for a year and start it up again with no issues. The Sertao is a great deal if you plan to do the work yourself. The fact that you don't need to take it to a dealership to get it serviced is great. Whereas some of the very nice modern mid-range adventure bikes out there, like the Aprilia Touareg and the T7, hey, I like both of them, they look amazing. They're the sort of in my height range, but they're a bit out of my price range. They're new and a little bit still untested, but with the BMW you have about 20 years of production in spares that will fit it. Lots and lots of cheap aftermarket parts, second-hand bits, well, keeps the running and the repairing of the bike nice and cheap. The Sertao is probably not the best looking bike. It's probably one of the most ugliest bikes out there. But you don't really see it when you ride the bike or when you're sitting on it. So the fact is that this bike has been so reliable over the years and has been relatively cheap to run and repair compared to other bikes out there like M wanting 50 quid for an air filter. And if you want a cheap mid-range adventure bike that can go anywhere, this might be the one to have a look at. So in conclusion, if I had to have one bike and I had to get rid of all my other bikes, unfortunately it would actually have to be the BMW 650. I have used it as a daily driver. I have used it to get to and from work, off-roading, long distance adventures, everything. It really is the best all-rounder out there that I've ever ridden and ever owned. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the review. If you are a Sertao owner and there's anything that I've missed, please let me know in the comments. I'm sure there is something I have overlooked or forgotten. And if you ain't a fan of the Sertao and you were a fan of the Honda CRF, I hope you understand now why I have kept this ugly bike over the Honda CRF 250L. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, drop it a like or whatever, and I'll catch you in the next video.